Lose yourself in a good book. The Board Gosh Energy Book Club.
A couple of Prezi ideas coming up indeed, with so many sports books hitting the shelves this year. It may be hard to choose the best one for the sports fan in your life. Niall Kelly, Deputy Editor of the 42.ie, joins us now. Help us narrow it down for you as he picks his top sporting books for Christmas. And we're going to start with John Leonard's doing the rounds, and his interviews on radio have been fairly interesting. Dubbed Sub-Confidential. It's not really a biography, or not a biography about just a sports player. He's had a crazy life.
No, John has had an absolutely crazy life. Probably not the most familiar name, not exactly a household name, but at a time when a lot of sporting autobiographies are very kind of formulaic and, it's just a very strict chronology of a player's career. This is really a breath of fresh air. John, for those who don't know him, was the understudy to Stephen Cluxton for a lot of the early 2000s. On the Dublin football team, but he's had a very traumatic life. He was abused as a child and then suffered a lot with drink and drugs, alcoholism and depression as he grew up through his mid-20s. And this is kind of a chronicling of that. And I suppose about 5 or 6 years ago, John resolved that he wanted to do a few things. He wanted to play for Dublin. He wanted to spend more time with his father, who was very ill, and he wanted to write a book. And I suppose this just brings all that together. But as I said, a breath of fresh air, not really a sport.
It turns out he can write.
It turns out he can, and he wrote it all himself. He did write it all himself.
Okay.
It's a very good read.
All right, brilliant stuff. So you don't have to be a Dub fan to read that, just to be aware of a life story in this, which is quite interesting. And he's on the right track now, and he's recovered fully from all of his problems. All right, Living on the Volcano is an unusual book. Michael Calvin put this together.
Yeah, it's the kind of book that if you saw in the shop, you might be inclined to pass by, but it really is. I think it's probably the soccer book of the year. And what it does is Michael Calvin has met a lot of English football managers. And it basically, as he says himself at the start, he's trying to humanise what's a very dehumanising job. Like, football management is notoriously unstable with the ease at which you can be fired from your job. And he goes behind the scenes and he meets these managers and gets really into their personalities and their lives. I mean, there's lovely little gems in it. Like, he talks about Ian Holloway, how he's moved house 33 times in his life.
Wow.
Because that's the instability of it. And it just really humanises these managers.
Yeah, which is fantastic. I mean, I used to read about Martin O'Neill, big fan of sitting in on murder trials if he'd spare time. Obviously wanted to be a barrister in a previous life. So it's interesting to see what makes him tick and some of the trials and tribulations they've been through.
Great access as well there to the managers.
Brilliant. OK, let's move on. Peter Stringer's book, Pulling the Strings.
Yeah, again, like, as in every year, there's an awful lot of sports autobiographies come out, and this is probably the pick of the rugby ones. You had Stephen Ferris's book as well, but Peter Stringer, he's probably one of the faces of that kind of golden generation of Irish rugby, and it reveals a really nice insight into his character. There's some really nice passages, particularly when he talks about his size. He's 5'7", very small for a rugby
player. He's in phenomenal shape. He was in here with us for the Rugby World Cup.
But that's it. But like, there's talking about his parents maybe were trying to get growth hormone therapy for him when he was younger, and he was so determined. And he said, I might be small, but if I had gone down a different path, it may have been a much worse rugby player, a much worse person for it. And I think there's just some really nice tidbits in that.
He has to recall the try against Biarritz, though. He
does indeed. Yeah, the highlight of his career.
That's what he'll be remembered for, indeed. Now, Sean McGoldrick, obviously a labour of love for Sean, punching above their weight is the history of the Irish boxing team at the Olympics. Yeah,
and I think particularly fitting this year, I suppose the Billy Walsh story was one of the big stories for the year, and Sean's book came out around the same time as that. For any boxing fans, it's a really good chronicle of how Irish boxing has come from maybe a place where 20 or 25 years ago it wasn't doing so great, through the high performance unit, through the work of Gary Keegan and Billy Walsh, to the place where they are now, where they won 7 medals across the last 2 Olympics.
Isn't it?
And it's not just, it has a look at the boxers' lives, it has a look at more than just Walsh and Keegan, more than just that conflict with the IABA, and really is, an essential read for anybody who was maybe dipping in and out of the Billy Walsh story.
It's superb, and I've no doubt the Michael Carruth and the Wayne McCullough stories paraded out there as well. Michael did a great interview with Paul Kimmage recently. Gave you an amazing insight into his life and how it is, and begs the question, do we value our Olympians enough? I mean, gold medalist, absolutely fantastic. The book I really love is this. It's been out for so long now. It's Ray McManus's stable, Sportsfile, put this together every year, and it's just a beautiful book.
Yeah, centrepiece of, I'm sure, many Irish Christmases. Any GAA family, there'll always be one that finds its way under the tree. And it's a collection of pictures from the Sportsfile team across the year, but it's not just the action shots, even though there are some unbelievably spectacular action shots in there.
You might see yourself and your child outside Croke Park or outside Cullen Park or something.
One of my favourite pictures in it is of Kieran McGeaney just signing an autograph for a young fan, and I mean, it brings the whole realm of GAA life together. The volunteers, stewards, referees, players, managers, bus drivers, the guys who sell the programme. It's
superb, isn't it?
It really is,
and
it's a great insight into our world.
I think there was one year there was a picture of a certain Dublin manager, Peter McCaffrey, and he was on duty in his Garda uniform at Croke Park, and it's just
there you go.
Smashing
You don't
stuff.
get it anywhere else, really.
Mary White's put together Relentless, which is the inside story of one of the most successful teams in the history of any sport in this country, which is the Cork Lady Footballers.
Yeah, it's been a really strong year for GA books. I suppose we mentioned John Lennon's, Jim McGuinness's book with Keith Duggan is excellent as well, and Mary White's book, you know, is a really interesting insight. A lot of people wouldn't know about the success of this Cork team, apart from maybe the headline.
The Dublin team would.
Yeah, apart from the headline of the amount of All-Irelands that they've won. And Mary has kind of been with them a lot of this journey, reporting on them. And she was really perfectly placed to really bring this story to the fore, and it's a really interesting read as well.
All right, Eamon Ryan deserves, and I've no doubt gets a lot of respect and a lot of plaudits in that book. Another book that will interest anybody in football in this country, particularly if you're a little bit older, Dalymount Park by Colin White. I mean, it was our Mecca for a long, long time. And
that's it. And it's kind of similar to the Sports File book in that it's a coffee table book. It'd make for a really nice present. And it just captures the essence of what Dalymount Park was about to Irish football. I know it's the home of Bohemians now, but the home of Irish football for so long.
For years,
many
years.
An institution in Irish football. And anybody who's ever had any passing interest in Irish football is going to love looking back over all the great photos that make this up, and some really nice stories. A really lovely foreword by John Giles as well, who, of course, is no better man than to talk about Dalymount Park.
All right, you gave an honorary mention there into the former Donegal manager's book, and I think Young O'Shea was in here as well with his book, which is a very interesting read, and that he's very forthright about the managers he played under, including his Uncle Paddy.
Yeah, and I suppose that's probably one of the better GA books again this year, Tomas's book. Another, for anybody who's into boxing, there's another book called A Man's World by Donald McRae. Donald McRae, one of my favourite journalists, and it looks at the life of Emile Griffith. Fascinating is all I'd say, but well worth a read.
All right, it has been an absolute pleasure. I presume you've had to trawl through all these, which wasn't a particularly hard job?
No, it's brilliant, and anybody who finds any of them under the Christmas tree this year is in for a treat.
All right, now here's where I'm going to be really mean, and if I said to you, you can only pick one of them, which one would you take with you?
Oh, God.
Sorry.
I'll take John Lennon's, but I just think, it maybe isn't a sports book in the strictest sense, but it really is a fascinating read.
All right, you got a lot out of it. Niall Kelly from the 42.ie, thanks very much for joining us.
No worries, thank you, Aidan.
Are you an aspiring writer? Would you like to have your own story published nationally? The theme for this year's Ireland AM Christmas Short Story Competition is The First Christmas. So if you'd love to have your story read out live on Ireland AM and featured in the Christmas edition of Irish Country Living magazine, as well as winning a luxurious weekend away, a book club goodie bag and a Versus tablet, all you have to do is send your story of no more than 500 words to irelandam@tv3.ie before 5 p.m. on Monday, December the 14th. Or post them to Bord Gáis Energy Book Club, TV3 Westgate Business Park, Ballymount, Dublin 24.
Lose yourself in a good book. The Bord Gáis Energy Book Club.